This table talk is made possible by Mental Health Matters, a newsletter from themighty.com. I'm Ashley, and I am joined by.
I'm Camara.
And I'm Skye.
And today, since my favorite band, and this is the only absolute reason we're talking about this topic, is Panic at the Disco, I thought it would be great to talk about panic attacks. I don't know about you all, but that seemed like a fun conversation. So, I want to really dive into what our experiences are, how they affect us, and give some tips for what helps us work through them. So, Camera, do you want to start with your experience?
Yes, I would be delighted. As a fellow panic attack slash panic at the disco fan, manic for panic. I that's all my panic uh modes I
Oh,
can
I was
say
gonna
at
say,
this
isn't Manic
moment.
Panic a hair dye?
It is a hair dye that I always wanted to use but never did. So, in this moment of realization and going back in time to try and figure out when I would have done that, let's go back in time to when I first figured out that I had panic attacks. Back in high school, I believe is kind of mid the time of me remembering what panic attacks were like for me. For me, this is my experience of what a panic attack feels like. I know everyone else's experience is their own and different. Mine is just kind of this feeling of not feeling like it's an outer body experience, kind of. You don't feel like you're really present. You feel like you're hyperventilating. It's a kind of like, I feel like I'm having a heart attack. For me, I like to just bawl out my eyes from the insides out, make sure that all of the blood comes to my face, deep breaths, until I finally feel calm again. I've had them since high school, and there's not really a specific thing that causes them that I know. It's usually just that kind of your jar you haven't dealt with. You have that top list. It can be a big thing. It can be a small thing. It could be, I don't even know why I'm feeling this, but I have to go and have my panic attack now. So
I have a question on that because this was something I was thinking about when I was kind of prepping what I wanted to speak to. Do you have anxiety attacks that feel like something has caused them, but your panic attacks feel more disconnected?
yeah, anxiety attacks are more just like I'm anxious about this specific situation and I'm like trying to deal with that, I feel like. Because anxiety attacks are more mental, I think. Whereas like a panic attack, you don't necessarily, there's likely a trigger for it, but it's much more intense and you feel it much more throughout. Whereas an anxiety attack is kind of more, at least for me, in my mind, where I'm just like, I just have to get through this feeling. So.
It's funny. I never really used the term anxiety attack. That's something that just wasn't in my vocabulary for probably until I started working at the Mighty. Because I guess I think of more like, oh, am I anxious over something? Like you were saying, Camera, oh, I know I'm anxious over this thing, and then it's lasting for this anxiety is like heightened for a long period of time. Whereas panic attacks, which I've been getting since I think it was like the night before I turned 13, I had my first full blown panic attack, like 20 minutes of adrenaline pumping and needing to just run into the middle of the street freaking out. But with panic attacks, I feel like I consider them more, yeah, like those out of body or like more isolated episodes. I mean, anxiety, of course, can trigger a panic attack. My panic attacks are largely to do with I get freaked out about death, dying, harm, coming to myself or loved ones. So you can imagine being in and out of hospitals all the time are not great for somebody who gets panic attacks. But I've also had physical situations. Like I went to a Trader Joe's in a city once, and it was just so crowded and cramped, and there were no windows, and the aisles were so narrow that induced a panic attack. And sometimes it's hard to tell, like, is my fight or flight response starting first, or do the thoughts come first? Because sometimes I find my pulse gets elevated and I start, hyperventilating, and then the thoughts will follow. So it's kind of a whole messy circle for me.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And when I first started having panic attacks, it was in middle school, and we actually ended up doing a lot of heart tests because I wasn't having any of those mental symptoms associated with it. I was just having like every time I describe it to someone, I'm like, I literally feel like someone injected me with adrenaline because it's just my heart racing and it's me getting I don't know, right, I'm through it and it's intense and crazy, but then it is like the fatigue is overwhelming. I have this once it's settled down, I feel like I don't know, like I've lost all the energy for 2 days. And we did a lot of like heart tests because I couldn't they I was like, I don't know what's happening. This is like a very strange phenomenon. And ultimately there was no results there. And then I learned more about what panic attacks are, and then, followed up with people from there. But like I was so confused by it because it didn't feel like it had any specific trigger, even though I know now that there definitely is one. It's just not one that I can usually identify because it's happening so disconnected.
Yeah, I completely agree. Kind of having that disconnected feeling when you're going into that, it just feel you don't know exactly even if the trigger was something mental, physical. You just kind of fall into it, and it feels very uncomfortable and not really something you can always control. I miss having a walk-in closet where I can just go hide and be in a tight space. Like that would always calm me down.
So I got a smartwatch for several reasons, but actually one of the reasons I wanted it was because I wanted that validation that it was happening. And now I can basically go, "Oh, I feel like my heart rate's increasing." And now that I exercise regularly, that's a more common thing versus like in the past when I had exercised, it reminded me so much of the feeling of a panic attack that I would end up having a panic attack. And so it's been like a really long journey for me to get from that point to actually like feeling okay and enjoying, quote unquote, let's be real, but like enjoying exercise and that sensation. And so I really just wanted that watch to like get the validation that it was happening, because like even though I've had it for forever, it still very much feels like I'm almost like making it up because there really isn't like a lot else going on besides the heart racing. But like I don't know, I needed that like like confirmation that my body was doing this thing that I knew was happening, but kind of like told myself wasn't happening and it wasn't real for really no beneficial reason.
It's very difficult to explain to people who have never experienced like prolonged anxiety or a panic attack what happens, because I don't know, how to look at somebody and be like, "Oh, so for the last 20 minutes, my nervous system has been on fire and I'm freaking out." Like that doesn't do it justice. Cuz they don't feel that like pressure on the chest and that, oh, everything's closing in on me and I'm sweating profusely and I can't do anything about it. Like that helplessness. I've definitely struggled trying to explain to others. I was unlucky in that I've been diagnosed with like OCD since I was 8. So when I started having panic attacks, it was kind of like, this is par for the course. We figured this would happen eventually. So I was fortunate, I guess, in that they also, panic attacks run in my family. My dad gets them too. So I was lucky in that he could identify it. Since about the age of 13, fresh air has been really helpful. My dad used to like help if I need to like leave school because I couldn't handle being in school for that time with the panic attack, or if it wasn't getting better. My dad would just like take me to get fresh air and everything. I was really lucky for that. And to this day, I think fresh air is a really big help for me. It's kind of interesting, Camera, how like your coping mechanism is kind of the exact opposite of mine, because panic attacks are so different and like personal for everybody. I think being in a tight space would make mine worse. So it's really interesting that that's like your go-to.
No, I think fresh air makes sense. Like having that like different like I think changing the environment is good in a way of like having from like, just home air to like fresh air to a different like space, especially outside. Outside always going to make you feel a little bit better if you can change your environment in that way, in a safe way. For me, like having a walk-in closet or having a tight space to go into, it just makes me feel like secured and coddled and kind of cuddled, like taken care of in a way. It's like I'm going into a space where I'm contained and I can contain myself, like, and feel protected in a way.
Yeah, I do think that's really interesting because I think it has to do with a lot of where you feel comfort and like what like personal comfort feels like for you. So like, some of the tips that I wanted to talk about really was just talking about how like weight and pressure is like the most successful kind of thing to help me get out of that more quickly. It will go away on its own eventually, but I don't highly recommend doing that approach but like, so, I have a weighted blanket that I use. One of the things I have to do when I'm in the middle of one is really just like sit down and like just stop moving, because that makes it a lot worse. The heart keeps racing like higher. And so if my weighted blanket's around, I'll do that. if my dog's around, I will call him over and have him lay on me. But if all of those aren't working, then usually what I do is I have to call my partner over, and I'm like, I literally just need you to like bear hug me, squeeze me as tight as you can. Like that is the support that I need in that moment. And so I'm curious if like other people, are able to help you, or like what that support might look like on your end.
This might just be in part due to, I guess, interactions I've had with people who carry and perpetuate the stigma of mental health conditions in the US, but I think I've almost conditioned myself to prefer to be alone during the situation unless somebody really gets what a panic attack is like. And I feel no judgment from them. Like if it's a truly safe person, then I'm okay saying, hey, can I bounce what I'm thinking, like my racing thoughts off of you right now? And can we just like talk it out? Or distraction, like along with another person, helps to make sure that, like, I don't know, when I'm with another person, who gets it, I feel safer. If that kind of support, like empathetic person isn't there, then I'm a big fan of, like Ashley, like you said, you just gotta stop and take a moment. Like I said, getting outside really helps. I also really like, I'll lay down on my back and put my feet up against a wall just to get that blood going back, just circulating nicely. I also think, I don't know, there's kind of relaxing. Maybe it's like the literal grounding of being on the floor, but I value my floor time.
Heck yes, the floor is so nice. There's something so comforting about being on the floor. It's like hard surface, but it's still like it's like you feel like you're a trooper. You're in the fight of it, and you're like, oh, but I can just be safe here on the floor. Yeah, with people, it depends. I've had good and bad situations where, for the most part, I think I prefer to be alone unless I trust the person. I've had someone basically tear me apart before for seeing me have a panic attack who didn't understand panic attacks, which is not great. But I have had some really wonderful people in my life we've both seen each other in vulnerable spaces, or we both have had those vulnerable conversations where if I am having one, I don't feel the need to run from them or to go and hide. Where having them, like, I think, yeah, having that bear hug, if you can, from someone you trust, is really helpful. Or having them, like you said, Skye, distract you, or in a calm, like simple way of like letting you talk it out, or letting you just be thinking about something else and kind of help your mind derail a little bit is good. So just get yourself a nice, like for me, I need a nice cup of tea or a magnesium drink, like that calm drink. Just have a deep breath. All that blood has been flowing to your face. Like find yourself some space.
Yeah, and it sounds like if people were a little more understanding about panic attacks, then that support would almost come a little more naturally, which I think is very interesting based on both your answers. So thank you both for talking about your experience with panic attacks today. I think it's still very comforting to know that like how shared of an experience it is, despite like all of the differences that we have along it. But if you want more conversations like this, subscribe to Mental Health Matters by going to bit.ly/mhinbox. That is bit.ly/MHINBOX. We'll see you in your inbox. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.